right, today we are diving deep into one of the most optimistic and maybe one of the most ambitious ideas in all of politics, liberalism, and its absolutely radical promise of a world without war.
So let's just start with the biggest question of all. Is a world completely free from war even possible? I mean, if you look at pretty much all of human history, the answer seems like a pretty clear no way. But what if a major political theory said, hold on, not so fast?
You see, the liberal tradition in international relations doesn't just, cross its fingers and hope for peace. It actually lays out a roadmap for how to get there. It sees war not as some inevitable part of human nature, but as a problem. And like any problem, it thinks it can be solved.
Okay, so how on earth is this supposed to happen? Well, to get it, you first have to understand liberalism's big central promise. It's the core vision that has made this idea so powerful ever since the Enlightenment. Liberals have this really powerful way of thinking about conflict. They see war kind of like a disease, an unnatural sickness that affects humanity. And just like any disease, they believe there's a cure. And the prescription is fascinating. It's a double dose of democracy and free trade. And this all breaks down into a kind of three-step plan for a better world. The core idea is that these three things, peace, prosperity, and freedom, all feed into each other. If you spread democracy, you get peace. If you open up free markets, you get prosperity. And if you focus on human rights, you guarantee freedom. Simple, right? Now, there was a moment in time when this incredibly optimistic idea wasn't just a theory. It felt inevitable. That moment was the end of the Cold War. When the Soviet Union collapsed, it felt like a massive victory, not just for one country, but for an entire way of life. In this feeling, this sense of triumph was captured perfectly by a political scientist named Francis Fukuyama. His idea was a huge deal because it put a name to what a lot of people in the West were already feeling. Now, he wasn't saying interesting things would stop happening, but that the big, epic battles over what kind of society is best, those were over. So the bottom line of his argument was this, that one particular model, liberal democracy with a capitalist economy, had proven it was better than all the others. Monarchy, fascism, communism, they'd all been tried and failed. For a lot of policymakers, this wasn't just an interesting thought. It became the playbook. The idea that the whole world was on a one-way street to this destination.
But okay, let's get practical. How is all of this supposed to actually work? What are the tools in the toolbox that liberalism uses to build this peaceful world? Let's break it down.
This is where we see the huge difference between liberalism and its main rival, realism. Realists argue from the outside in. They say the world has no global government, it's just anarchy, and that forces every country to constantly fight for power. Liberals, though, they argue from the inside out. They believe what a country is like on the inside, whether it's a democracy or not, is the single most important thing that decides how it behaves in the world. And that brings us to the first medicine, the democratic peace theory. This is, and I'm not exaggerating, one of the most powerful claims in all of international politics. I mean, just think about it. For centuries, Europe was the bloodiest continent on the planet. But the idea of France and Germany going to war today, it sounds completely nuts. Liberals say this zone of peace isn't an accident. It's proof that while democracies might fight authoritarian countries, they just don't fight each other. And the second medicine, it's all about economic interdependence. The logic is actually pretty simple. When you trade freely with another country, you create this whole web of shared interests. Your economy needs their economy and vice versa. And suddenly, going to war with them becomes completely irrational. It's like taking a sledgehammer to your own wallet. It becomes just too costly to even think about. So for a while there, especially in the 1990s, it really looked like this whole liberal plan was unfolding just right. But then the 21st century showed up, and reality started to bite back, hard. A whole series of crises popped up that didn't just question liberal optimism, they seemed to blow it right out of the water. It all kicked off with the 9/11 attacks, which launched the massive war on terror. A few years later, the 2008 financial crisis sent the entire global capitalist system into a tailspin. Then, the hopeful Arab Spring devolved into civil war and dictatorship. And for the last decade or so, we've seen democracies actually move backwards in some places, while powerful, non-liberal countries have risen with incredible confidence. And look, each of these events was a direct hit. The war on terror brought back the national security state, which challenged the liberal idea of a small government. The financial crisis destroyed the idea that free markets always fix themselves. Democratic backsliding proved that history doesn't just move in one direction. And maybe the biggest one of all, the stunning economic success of authoritarian China showed the world that, hey, maybe you can have prosperity without having democracy.
So, where does all this leave us? Where does it leave this grand theory today? We've clearly moved on from the peak optimism of the 90s, and we're now in a much, much murkier and more uncertain future for the whole liberal world order. And let's be totally clear here. The legacy of liberalism is profound. That zone of peace among the world's established democracies, that's real and it's a massive achievement. The entire global human rights movement, that comes straight out of liberal thinking. And yet, you just can't ignore the fact that the theory is on its back foot, forced to rethink some of its biggest ideas in a world that turned out to be a lot messier than expected. Which brings us to our final big question. Was that triumphant moment after the Cold War really the end of history? Was that the final destination for all of us? Or was it just the end of one chapter, with the next, more complicated, more uncertain chapter still being written right now, today?